They went quiet when the world expected wails. And that silence has become one of the loudest facts in the story. If you want first-hand updates on this case and others like it, hit subscribe now and turn on the notification bell. Every share and every tip helps keep pressure on the search for Lilly and Jack. On May 2nd, two little children vanished from a rural Nova Scotia yard, and a community that once felt safe found itself asking unbearable questions. In most missing child cases, the public sees a pattern: frantic family appeals, tearful vigils, a stream of media interviews from the people closest to children. That visible grief matters. It keeps a case in the spotlight and can prod witnesses to speak. What made this case different early on was one person's absence from that script. According to multiple public reports and a timeline that has been shared with media, Malaya Brooks Murray, the children's mother, did not speak publicly after the disappearance. She did not make televised pleas. She did not post vigils or emotional updates. Instead, within a very short window after the missing persons report was filed, she engaged legal counsel, and that counsel became the public face, handling communications and advising on interactions with investigators and media. Saying nothing can be a statement in itself. Silence has many tones: trauma, shock, strategic restraint, distrust, legal caution. The public is entitled to note the difference between private shock and an organized decision to avoid public contact. That difference is what makes the timeline important. Sources indicate that legal counsel was retained early, within 48 hours of the report being filed, a fact that startled many residents and observers. In ordinary circumstances, people consult lawyers for a range of reasons. In missing persons investigations, though, hiring counsel so early can be interpreted in multiple ways. Some read it as a prudent step by a traumatized parent who wants to make sure she doesn't say something that could later be misunderstood. Others see it as a defensive posture adopted immediately to control narrative and protect against potential legal exposure. Meanwhile, the children's stepfather, Daniel Martell, reportedly took the opposite tack at first. He was visible. He spoke to reporters, and public-facing accounts show him answering questions and describing the morning as a quiet, ordinary one, until inconsistencies in his statements and in later reporting cause him to shift course and take legal advice as well. That contrast, a mother who withdrew under counsel early and a father who initially overshared, is notable because it framed public perception from the start. When a family's public voice is split, suspicion and speculation fill the gaps. People who wanted to comfort a grieving household instead found themselves parsing statements for gaps, timing, and motive. It must be stressed, though, that retaining a lawyer is not, on its own, evidence of guilt. Many people in highly stressful or legally complex circumstances seek legal counsel precisely because they are frightened, confused, or want to protect their rights. Lawyers advise clients to limit public comment for many reasons: to avoid inadvertently contradicting a later, more complete statement, to prevent misleading details from becoming part of the evidentiary record, and to preserve the ability to speak freely to investigators under counsel. A lawyer who becomes a gatekeeper can also be a shield against media intrusion at a time of intense grief. That said, the pattern in this case, silence from the mother and visible, sometimes contradictory detail from the stepfather, fed anxiety and suspicion in the community. People noticed the contrast. They expected despair, imploration, and visible appeals. Instead, they saw a legalized, curated silence. Neighbors who had once stopped in for coffee said it felt odd not to see posts, memorials, or pleas. Community members who organized searches and vigils found themselves wondering whether the family wanted the world to help find the children, or preferred a quieter, lawyer-managed approach. Those private bewilderments spilled into public forums, creating a second storyline alongside the official investigation. How did the community react to this silence? The reaction was not monolithic. Some friends and relatives defended Malaya's privacy and argued that trauma manifests in different ways. Others, including volunteers who spent long days searching woods and waterways, so they felt a kind of abandonment, as if the emotional labor of keeping the story alive had been left to strangers, support groups, and online activists. It's difficult to quantify how public sentiment shifts in a crisis, but visible sorrow often galvanizes broader support. In its absence, observers tend to focus on procedural questions. Why didn't she speak? Who is managing communications? What are the lawyers telling her not to say? That line of inquiry is natural, but it also has a danger of replacing careful investigation with rumor. Investigators, for their part, operate in a different register. They confirm that counsel was retained and acknowledge that some statements they might otherwise seek from family members were channeled through lawyers. Law enforcement has legal and tactical reasons to coordinate with counsel. Statements given without legal context can later be retracted or challenged, affecting an investigation's integrity. There's also the question of self-incrimination and the suspect's right to silence. Police must balance the need for information with constitutional protections. That balance becomes more delicate when the public reads legal restraint as evidence of concealment. Reports surfaced that investigators noted inconsistencies in early timelines related to the family's account of the morning and the lead-up to the disappearance. Those inconsistencies, the kind that include mismatched times, slightly altered descriptions of routine, or conflicting recollections of who was last with the children, are not uncommon in high-stress situations. In any traumatic event, memory can fragment. Details shift, time perception changes, and ordinary sequences can be misremembered. But when inconsistencies accumulate and cannot be reconciled by cross-checking objective data, such as CCTV, phone records, or third-party timestamps, investigators are right to flag them and probe further. The presence of early counsel makes those probes look different to the public. Legal experts quoted in similar cases have described early attorney involvement as a predictable move when a person fears legal exposure or inaccurate public portrayal. Lawyers are trained to protect clients from statements that could later be used out of context. They often advise against public interviews until facts are fully assembled. For relatives in the community, however, that protection can feel like a dam holding back information that might help find missing children, making a reasonable legal tactic into an emotional provocation. Media and cultural references frame this pattern in ways that heighten public reaction. Commentators have pointed to famous cases where parents' public silence, accompanied by careful legal strategies, later look suspicious to outsiders, such as the Casey Anthony case in the United States, where the mother's terse public manner and early legal maneuvering fed intense scrutiny. Legal analysts caution against simplistic comparisons. Each case has its own facts, and patterns that look similar on the surface can differ wildly in substance. Nevertheless, high-profile analogs have trained public attention to interpret silence in criminal cases as potentially strategic rather than purely sorrowful. That lens shapes how community members read every lawyerly maneuver in this case. Another dimension of this story concerns the gatekeeper role attributed to the mother's attorney. When an attorney screens calls, blocks media questions, and handles contact with investigators, the effect is to centralize communication, often a practical and legally protective step. But in the atmosphere of a missing person search, gatekeeping can also feel opaque and defensive. Community members reported frustration at not being able to deliver information directly. Volunteers wondered whether tips were being filtered away. From an investigative standpoint, however, centralization of communication can prevent inconsistent public statements that would confuse witnesses or complicate legal processes. It can also preserve the family's privacy and mental health at a brutal moment. Public perception shifted as months passed and silence endured. Outwards, the family's lack of visible emotion in public forums contrasted with candlelight vigils, tearful support groups, and social media campaigns urging people to share flyers and check old footage. That contrast made the silence more noticeable and, for many, harder to understand. Silence, in some people's view, became an architectural choice, a strategy built on legal counsel and controlled messaging, rather than a raw emotional response. For others, the silence was a necessary protection, a way to hold together in private what the media might otherwise splinter in public. Legal commentators stress nuance. They point out that early counsel may aim to protect innocent clients from coercive questioning that could produce inadvertent false statements. In that sense, silence is a protective measure. But they also note that when counsel's role appears to impede the flow of potentially urgent information, investigators and the public can reasonably ask whether counsel is balancing protection with cooperation. The ideal scenario in such investigations is collaboration. Legal counsel advising a client while also ensuring necessary cooperation with law enforcement to find missing people. When those two goods, client protection and investigative assistance, fall out of alignment, tensions flare. The question that keeps echoing is simple and terrible. Does silence protect innocent privacy or mask culpability? And of course, there is a third possibility. Silence both reflects trauma and happens to be an effective legal posture. The problem for investigators and for the public is that appearance matters. When a parent behaves in ways that diverge from public expectations, rumor and mistrust rush to fill the void. Investigators then must work even harder to rely on facts and evidence. Phone metadata, financial records, CCTV, witness statements, and forensic testing of physical evidence, such as a pink blanket, recovered early in the case. Those objective traces, not social media impressions, eventually determine what happened. What can we take away from this complex mix of law, grief, and community reaction? First, legal counsel is a normal, often prudent response in a high-stakes situation. It does not, by itself, prove wrongdoing. Second, the speed with which counsel is obtained is unusual enough to merit scrutiny and explanation in public discourse, because early counsel changes how information flows. Third, public trust erodes when communication is tightly controlled and reassurance is scarce. Investigators, family members, and counsel should recognize that transparency, balanced with legal protection, is valuable for both public confidence and for encouraging tips. Fourth, silence could be a strategy born of fear, trauma, or legal advice. Separating those motives requires patient, evidence-driven inquiry. Finally, the ultimate test will be objective. What do communications logs, device data, physical traces, and corroborating witness accounts show when analyzed together? This case remains an active investigation. Officials ask anyone with relevant information, however small it may seem, to contact the investigators. If you have dashcam footage, phone records, old videos, or memory you once dismissed, bring it forward. Authorities often stress that a tip that feels minor to you may be decisive when combined with other evidence. We will continue to follow verified developments and report carefully. For now, if you want to keep pressure on the search for Lilly and Jack and to receive prompt updates as new facts emerge, please like this report, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Thoughtful public attention helps. So does patience with due process. Don't trade rumor for certainty. Instead, help gather facts. The path to truth in cases like this is rarely quick, but it is relentless, and every detail matters.